Welcome to Inside View. I'm your host, Joel Metzger. And joining me today is Derek Cole, who is the city attorney for Angels Camp. Derek, welcome.
Thank you, Joel. Good to be here.
Great to have you on the show for the first time. You've been the city attorney since when for Angels City?
Since December of 2012, so about a year and a couple of months.
And before you became the city attorney, had you had the chance to travel through Calaveras at all, or?
Yes, I have. I've been through here a number of times, just recreationally and just for other reasons. Love it here.
It's a gorgeous county, especially it seems like this time of year. The green grass is growing, the wildflowers, all the trees are in bloom. I mean, I was just walking through the area by my office today, and I was just overwhelmed by how gorgeous it is.
It's beautiful. I'm glad to see we're getting some more rain because it wasn't quite as green as it normally should be, but we've had a couple of good storms. And yeah, it's beautiful. And I have to drive from my home in Sacramento, and it's about an hour and 20 minutes, but I love it, especially if it's not nighttime. I really enjoy the views.
What is the route that you take? Do you go Liberty Road, or do you come across through Jackson and all that area?
Depends. My office is in Roseville, so if I come through Roseville, I come out through Latrobe, and then if I go home, I go Liberty Road. That
drive through Latrobe and then through Jackson and all that is just gorgeous. I would almost just drive it for the heck of it.
Well, the other good thing is I know where all the CHP hiding spots are.
Oh, do you?
Yes, I do. And
do you want to give a shout out for
Well, I don't know. I probably shouldn't. I haven't been pulled over yet, so okay. I'm happy about that.
So just so people know, you are the city attorney, but this is one of several different cities and counties that you and your firm represent. So it's almost like you're kind of like a part-time city attorney. Would that be fair to characterize it?
That's fair. You know, some cities are small, so Angels Camp is small in population. Sutter Creek is another city where I'm city attorney, and you just don't need a full-time city attorney. The expense would be prohibitive, and so some cities find that contracting with a firm gives them the coverage they need, but allows us to build the representation of Angels Camp and Sutter Creek with some of our other clients.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty innovative, really, because to try to, like you said, have a full-time attorney, you can't use an attorney that much to really make that a justified cost, I imagine.
Right. Angels Camp, for instance, is probably somewhere between 40 to 50 hours a month of attorney work, including me and some others at my firm. And, that would be about a third of what a full-time attorney would normally be expected to do. And then when you add in PERS and other benefits that public agencies typically provide, it really just doesn't make sense for some cities. Now, some cities have full-scale departments, and really it doesn't make sense for them to contract out. So it really just depends on what type of city you are, how big you are, the geographic area. Some cities or counties are very remote, not Angels Camp by any stretch, but other jurisdictions we do work with. And so they find that, bringing someone even as far away as Sacramento really works for them.
Before we go into some of the details of what exactly it is that you do and some of the issues that you've dealt with, I wanted to just introduce you to people a little bit more. So take me all the way back to where you grew up.
Well, I grew up in two places. I was born in California, but only lived here a brief time. So I spent a little over the first half of my childhood in the Houston area, Houston, Texas, just a suburb just north of Houston. So I had a little Texas flavoring, even though I consider myself native Californian. And then I moved to the Sacramento area when I was 12, and I've lived in Sacramento since I've been 12 years old. I'm 40 now, other than 4 years in college in Santa Barbara.
I hear no Texas drawl.
It's funny. I had friends in high school who could detect that, and every now and then I'll throw out a y'all, and it seems natural. Now, it's funny. It's a joke. I went back and visited Texas, and I was, saying "you guys," and people looked at me funny, like I'm not a guy. Women would say that, and then when I first got here, when I was in 6th grade, I threw out a couple y'alls, and it's almost like the sound of the record screeching. I mean, it was that pronounced, and so I quickly stopped doing that. So it's interesting.
Now, growing up in Texas, did you notice any significant differences, whether it be culturally or just the way things went, or is it pretty much the same over there as a kid as it was in California?
I don't think I was old enough to really appreciate the differences. I think, Texas is part of the South, not part of the Deep South, but I do think culturally it was more conservative, and I'm not necessarily saying that politically, although politically I think it's a red state, we're a blue state. But I felt like, culturally, institutions and the way things were done were a little different. There was a lot more manners. I don't remember ever calling an adult by his or her first name. It was always Mr. or Mrs. Teachers were a little bit more strict than what I'm used to here in California. California, I think people are a little bit more laid back. I think people are more warm, and at least in Texas, but here I think people are a little more just, we're Californians, we're laid back. So I definitely see some differences, but I left Texas when I was 12, so all of I think 3/4 of my life have been here, so I think my experience is very colored by California.
When you were in high school, did you have even the foggiest idea that you were destined to be a lawyer?
Yes, and I don't know why. I just always thought I would be a lawyer. And it was, I think my father, I remember having a conversation with him in junior high school where he said, I think you'd be good at being a lawyer. And obviously, he knew who I was and he had raised me, and so he probably was in the best position to figure out what kind of person I was at that time. But obviously your parents say one thing, and obviously you have to find your own path. But I don't know why. I went into college as pre-law. In high school, I thought I would be pre-law when I went to college, and then I had no hesitation to apply for law school. So it's just one of those things that was in my head. I don't know how I got there, but it was there.
Well, your dad, you said, had some car dealerships
Yes.
growing up, and he even had some interest if he had another life to live in doing law, right?
Yeah, I think that's what he's told me recently, because I asked him about that, and I said, well, how did, because now I have kids, and I witness my son and my daughter. My daughter in particular she's very good at speaking. She got up recently in front of an audience and emceed a talent show for her school, and she was funny, she was witty, she had no hesitation about getting up in front of a huge crowd of students and parents and just yucking it up and enjoying herself. And I explained to her, you really have a knack for that, and you don't have some of the natural fear that people have when they speak in public. And so as a father, I started wondering, should I sort of push her towards some career that involves these things? And that got me to thinking about, well, what happened when I was this age? And I remembered the conversation with my father. But I think what he told me is that he always thought that he'd enjoy the law. And so maybe some of that was, hey, this is something I'd enjoy, so maybe you might enjoy that too.
Your daughter's 7 years old?
My daughter's 10, my son
She's
is
10.
7.
Even at 10, though, that's pretty impressive that she can get up there and, wow.
Yeah, I don't, it is pretty impressive. But it's interesting with kids to see how things come naturally, and to see different characteristics in your children, and see a little bit of you, see a little bit of your wife, and then see a little bit of, I don't know where that came from.
Yeah. So you went to school first at UCSB
Yes.
in Santa Barbara, and then you ended up going to, was it McGeorge?
McGeorge, yes, in Sacramento.
So I've always thought, I personally thought about doing law school for a while, but I've always heard so many different stories about it was either the hardest thing I've ever done, or almost didn't make it, or some of my friends said I just straight up burned out. It was too much for me. So what was your experience with law school?
My experience was a good one. I enjoyed it, but it was intense. It was a lot of work. My first year, the thing about law school is your first year is infamous. The first year is when everyone gets weeded out. There's some novels. 1L is a famous novel written by Scott Turow, who wrote some murder mystery shows that became movies, some great novels. But 1L is sort of a famous book. The Great Paper Chase is another kind of older generation. But the first year of law school is really intense. It has this drama about it. It has this perception, and it lives up to that. It's pretty intense. It's a lot of work. I would get up in the morning and study. I would, go to class. I would come home and study. I'd study on Saturday. I'd study on Sunday. So it was tough. It was kind of like a, kind of like a marathon, really. But ultimately, I learned how to accept it, and I enjoyed it. Now, a lot of people didn't. A lot of people dropped out. A lot of people who ultimately became lawyers have found other careers. So it's like any career. Some people are going to like it, some people are not, and you're going to have to figure out what's right for you.
After you won that marathon, got all the way through it, you must have had some kind of a chain of career paths to where you got here to Angels Camp, along with your other Sutter Creek and other counties you represent. But what did you do right out of law school as your first step?
First step was to join a firm that specialized in land use and environmental law. An excellent firm, a firm that I worked at for 5 years, and wonderful people, wonderful attorneys, learned a lot. So I was really just a land use attorney and an environmental attorney for the private side, the development side. At that time, I wanted to expand into more litigation, more traditional litigation, and so then I joined a very large firm, a statewide firm whose focus was on public agencies, or at least a large focus, and did all kinds of litigation for public agencies and really enjoyed the variety. I really, whether it was constitutional issues, land use issues, code enforcement issues, did some police and sheriff issues, just got a really wide exposure and really enjoyed having many different challenges in many different subject areas. And so then in 2007, two other attorneys and I split off of that firm to start our own firm. And from there, we continued to do a lot of the litigation, but expanded into advisory work, city attorney work like we're doing for Angels Camp.
What did it take to kind of take that step out of this big firm and kind of go off on your own? That's probably not a decision you took lightly, I imagine.
Well, I'm blessed. I have the main partner of my firm who left had been a managing partner of the statewide firm that we were at, and really just knew how to run a business. And so I was very blessed that I had someone who knew what he was doing, who knew how to run a firm, because what I've learned as a partner of a law firm is that separate and apart from the practice of the law, the business side of running a law firm is challenging, and lawyers are not good business people. At least that's my opinion. The type of mindset that you need to be a lawyer, the analytical mind, the adversarial mind sometimes doesn't play well with the business side. And so I was fortunate in that the main partner that started the firm had all of that. He knew what he was doing. He had a great plan. He was blessed with the ability to be an administrator. And so quite honestly, I didn't have to do a lot of administration when we started the firm. I could focus on building my own practice, which, at age 34, 35, wherever I was really what I needed at that point.
The idea of offering services kind of by contract to cities and counties and things like that, was that a unique idea that your firm came up with, or is that a common practice throughout the state of California?
It's a common practice. Well, let's take cities. There's probably, I think, 450 cities. The majority of the cities are represented by firms as opposed to in-house city attorney departments. The reason being that, when you really need a certain population before you can justify having an in-house legal department, or you need to have a certain economic base because it is expensive to hire a lawyer. As I said, lawyers have salary expectations. We have a lot of debt that we come out of law school with. In-house public lawyers have public benefits, PERS, and other things. And so if you're a city of 2,000, 3,000, even 10,000, even 50,000 population, you don't really need the full-time city attorney department. So cities, most of them contract out. It's really the bigger cities. Sacramento, is probably the closest. Stockton, Modesto, that will actually have in-house departments. Counties, on the other hand, typically are big enough. There are 58 counties, only 4 of them contract out, because counties have to provide a wide array of services They have large populations typically, and so they typically don't hire out. So there's a lot of firms that do city attorney work like we do. I think we're different in that we're probably the only firm that does city attorney work and county council work. So we have those handful of counties that actually contract out. We have 3 of them. And so that's where I think we're a little different, is that we do city and county work.
How did your firm end up representing Angels Camp?
The prior city attorney retired, and so because he retired, the city had an immediate need for an interim city attorney. The city administrator had, as I understand, he had checked some references, he had talked to some folks, and somehow got our name as someone who could fill in. We then filled in with the idea that we were only going to be the interim city attorney, that there would be a competitive process which we could certainly bid for, but that ultimately we would technically only be interim, and we would have to compete just like all of the other firms that might want to compete. And then the competitive process happened, and we were a finalist, and then ultimately we interviewed, and we became city attorney. I think that was last May officially when we became city attorney.
And in that process, is it really just based on lowest bid for X, Y, and Z services, or do they also consider relationships or how well you presented yourself and so on and so forth? Do you know what the criteria were?
We've done these so many times, and my sense is that the first thing public agencies look for is competence. I think they want to make sure that they have a city attorney or a county council that's going to give them accurate legal advice. Because first and foremost, that's the job of a city attorney or a county council. I think secondly, they look at, can we relate to this person? It's like going to a doctor. There's some doctors, as they say, don't have a good bedside manner. And if you're a patient, that might grate on you, and you might want someone who's, a little more understanding, a little better in their demeanor. And law is not really different. You have to have a good relationship with your counsel and with your administration. So just like if you were interviewing me for a job, even if you thought I was very qualified, if you just didn't like the vibe I was giving, you might prefer another person. I think those are the 2 biggest factors: quality and the ability to relate to somebody. I think cost is important. Obviously, if someone comes in and says, I want $450 an hour, even if they have the greatest vibe and they have the greatest qualities, I don't think a place like Angels Camp is going to hire that person. That's way outside of market rate. But I think that, so I think that's probably a third factor that's not as important as the other 2, as long as you're within a ballpark of reasonableness in your rates.
So what was the arrangement for you to represent the Angels City?
So the arrangement we have is a retainer. One of the things that my firm likes that I think maybe distinguishes us a little bit from other private firms that do city attorney services is we really like the broad retainer, which is, this is how much you pay us per month, and we'll give you all your city attorney services. Doesn't matter how many hours it takes, what it takes, we'll give you that. So we charge the city a monthly retainer of $8,000 unless we do not hit 32 hours in 1 month, in which case we charge $7,000. And so basically that monthly retainer covers everything unless there's litigation, in which case that would be an hourly rate, just like most attorneys get. But the city council would have to approve us. We don't get the litigation automatically. They have to say, okay, Coda Cole, the name of my firm, we want you to represent us, or we want someone else to represent us, and we want you to supervise.
Sure. So that brings me to job description. What is it that a city attorney does for a city, basically? What are your main responsibilities?
Well, California is, and I think any public agency throughout the nation, but in California, public agencies are subject to numerous laws covering numerous areas. We have land use, we have environmental law, we have law enforcement, we have public services, water, sewer, solid waste collection. There's a whole host of laws. Then we have open meeting laws, the Brown Act that most people know about, ethics laws, public records requirements so that people can, their government doesn't do things in secret, that they can go get all of the records that their government generates. So my description is basically give legal advice about all of those things. And so that's what I would say. Now, there's a lot of specific tasks that I do, but the bottom line is my job is to make sure that the city gets good legal advice about the many laws that it has to comply with.
Would you say that you're kind of keeping people out of trouble who may not know these laws as well as they should, and that's kind of the role that you're filling? I mean, are you always kind of preventing the city from getting sued, or is that not really how you see it?
That's part of what I do. Obviously, any good lawyer is going to keep his or her client out of trouble. And then that's true in any type of law, even representing private clients. And that's true when you represent municipal clients. But I don't, to me, my job is to make sure that the city gets correct legal advice. If the city gets correct legal advice, then generally it should stay out of trouble. Now, there are situations where you can give legal advice and somebody might not take that. But that's not in my control or any attorney's control. So yes, I mean, I think I think when I became a lawyer, someone gave me as a gift, a gag gift, a refrigerator magnet, and it said, "Lawyer, person whose job is to keep clients out of trouble from other members of the profession," something like that. And so there's that kind of flip thing that yes, I'm trying to keep the city out of trouble, but to me, I look at it as I need to give the city correct legal advice, and in giving correct legal advice, then if the net result is that the city stays out of trouble, well, good.
Have you ever had, not just in Angels Camp, but in general, have you ever had someone hear you and then ignore you and do something against what you said?
In my private, with my private clients, yes. I really haven't had a public agency client just completely ignore my advice. I think the thing about city administrators, county administrative officers, general managers is that they've been around long enough to know that they need legal advice, that they, running their agency is difficult enough that they don't have the ability to play lawyers. So if they feel like you're giving them good advice and you're responsive, they'll listen, and usually they'll take your advice. So I can't think of an example where a public agency client has just said, yeah, sorry, we don't care what you have to say. I can think of plenty of examples where private clients have done that, but not public clients.
Well, so one, as you said, they know they need to listen to legal advice, or two, maybe that speaks to the fact that you're good at conveying perhaps complex issues in an understandable way that makes sense to people.
I hope that's true, but but I leave that to my clients. I mean, my goal, any good attorney will always want to engender confidence. I mean, one of the things, if I had a young lawyer say, what is the key to the legal profession? The key really is inspiring confidence. Inspiring confidence in your clients that you actually know what you're doing and that you will give them good advice. Inspiring confidence in an opposing attorney that you can resolve a problem if the two of you work together, or inspiring confidence in a member of the public or an applicant who comes to a city that you will be treated fairly, and I will make sure as legal counsel for this agency that whatever the result, there will be a fair process. So that's what a good lawyer does. I try very hard to do that. I can't say that I'm perfect and that I've never failed. I have, but I think that's what I try to do as best I can.
In the city of Angels Camp, are there any specific issues that you're working on that may get to the litigation side of things?
We have litigation pending, and we've had a couple of cases. I can't think of anything right now as I sit here that I think I'm worried will go to litigation. We have some planning issues, zoning issues that are coming up. Zoning is one of those areas that's always controversial. Land use in California in particular is controversial. So I can, just being a city attorney, I can expect in this city, as well as any other cities where my firm is city attorney, that land use is going to cause some lawsuit somewhere at some point.
The issue with Greenhorn Creek, and I know that's been kind of a bit contentious at some of the meetings. Can you just very briefly summarize what's going on there?
The issue there is that there's some wetlands in the Greenhorn Creek development, mostly in and around the golf course, that have diminished below the standards for wetlands. The agency that regulates wetlands is the Army Corps of Engineers. And there's about an acre of the wetlands in that subdivision that have diminished below what the Corps considers to be the correct standards. And so somebody needs to do something about that. The city's position that it's taken is that the city will spend the money from within the landscape and lighting district. And the landscape and lighting district involves all of the properties in Greenhorn Creek. There's about a $300,000 surplus that is accumulated, and the city wants to spend that money to fix the wetlands, essentially. There is a group of plaintiffs who disagree and don't believe that that's appropriate, and so they've challenged whether or not the city has the legal right to do that. That's kind of it in a nutshell. It's more complex than that, but basically the question is, does the city have the right to spend this surplus money?
When will this be resolved in your mind, do you think?
Probably in a couple of months we'll put it before the court.
Okay.
It would be my best guess.
Final question is, what's the most challenging part of your job?
The most challenging part of my job is to make sure that I respond all the time. And I'm not saying that responsiveness is something that I have trouble with. It's just I'm pretty anal retentive. I don't let emails go by. I don't let calls go by without responding to them and making sure that people don't ever have to, say, why isn't Derek getting back to me? Why am I having so much trouble getting a hold of him? If there's one thing I fear, it's the tag that I'm the guy that doesn't call back. I'm the guy that doesn't respond. I'm the guy that doesn't handle things quickly enough. And so, I work really hard to do that, but it's a lot of emails, walking around with my phone. I'm at lunch, emailing people, texting people. So that becomes a challenge sometime, but it's one I'm okay with.
Well, I want to thank you for the service that you've done for the City of Angels Camp, and hope that we can continue to have your good services in this county. And if people want to reach you, your number was just on the screen. So thanks
Great.
for joining me tonight.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
And thank you for joining me on this edition of Inside View. I'm your host, Joel Metzger, and I hope you join me next time.